We have in our studios Tom Friedman, the foreign affairs columnist of New York Times and author of World is Flat. Tom, welcome back.
Great to be here again, Mike.
Your book, World is Flat, came out about a year ago. Other than the fact that it has sold 1.5 million copies and it has been on the New York Times bestseller list for 45 weeks, what else has changed in the time since the book came out?
Well, you know, one of the things I've enjoyed most, Diane, is first of all, just thinking about why did this book catch on? You know, after all, it's a book about globalization, somewhat technical in some cases. And I've really spent a lot of time asking myself, you know, what's going on here? As I say, I'd like to think it's because of my mellifluous voice and beautiful brown eyes, but I'm not that stupid. So I know that I caught a wave, Diane, and so what was it?
That wave?
What was that wave? And I guess the best way I could summarize it is that it's a wave of anxiety. It's a wave that basically I would describe like this. Our parents were sure that they were going to live better than their parents, and they were just as sure that we, their children, were going to live better than them. Our generation is now coming to retirement, worried that we may not retire as well as our parents. And you know what? Our kids may not live as well as we do. And I think that anxiety that we are now being touched by people who never touched us before, we're competing with people who we never competed with before, and fortunately we're collaborating with people we've never been able to collaborate with before. But for all those reasons, there is a wave of anxiety out there, that there's a lot of things changing, a lot of traditional boundaries are being eliminated, competition is much more intense, and gosh, I wonder if my kids are going to live as well as me.
So the kind of the fear of the unknown, that what is ahead, big things are changing so fast.
It's a fear of the unknown, and I would say the known, because it's a fear of what people see as real competition now, coming from corners that they've never seen it before, coming into the white-collar realm, not just the blue-collar realm, where we've become used to it, and not knowing where it stops. Okay, the call center operator, well, that's not important, but my radiologist is now, you know, using outsourcing to have x-rays read somewhere. My accountant, you know, is now drawing or can now draw on someone in India to do accounting. So suddenly so many more things seem to be able to be digitized, automated, or outsourced. Where that stops or starts, I think has a lot of people concerned.
Judging by the reaction you got in the Silicon Valley, you have been almost made into a prophet there. Now, how do you see the U.S. high-tech companies adjusting to this flat world?
Well, you know, the good news is everything I learned about the flat world, I really learned from companies. I learned from CEOs and CIOs and CTOs who were doing it. Mm-hmm. But two things were happening. One is they were doing it, but they weren't talking about it. Because no one who wanted to talk about outsourcing.
Right.
And it's one of the kind of reasons I walked into a vacuum on this book, an intellectual vacuum, is that the people who are doing it, and boy, they're doing it, and they're doing it at the cutting edge, and thank goodness, because they're really driving American competitiveness and companies forward. But they didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to talk about it. So one of the fortunate things I was able to do was to go in and get them to talk about it, and then kind of put it all together. And that really related to another point, and why I think the book, you know, caught on a little in Silicon Valley. Each one was doing it, but in his or her realm, in their own dot. But nobody was really connecting the dots. And it always struck me, now, you know, when someone like Michael Dell invited me to come to Dell to talk about the book to his management team. And my attitude was, you talking to me? Is there someone behind me? You're talking to me? You want me to come to talk to you? No. And I realized then, you know, from that experience that even though they were in the middle of it, a lot of them, they actually hadn't gotten outside. And therefore, because I was just talking to all of them across the spectrum, and then kind of put it all together, they found that actually both useful and informative. So those two things really came together for me, to my benefit.
Yeah, the other group of people I think have been very troubled by your book is the sort of education circle in the United States. I've been hearing from people that they are extremely worried as to what does this flat world mean for U.S. education system. What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, you know, if I've gotten feedback from any group, any single group, more than any other, it's from American educators, school superintendents, teachers, and whatnot. all of whom, sense that we're not really staying at the cutting edge, that we are getting this competition, and everyone now strategizing about it. It's actually quite exciting. There's an incredible amount of experimentation going on in education in America today. I'm actually an optimist. Mm-hmm. I'm actually much more optimistic today than when you and I talked about the book a year ago, because I see the reaction, not just to the book, but to the moment that the book describes, is not one of triumphalism. Oh, we'll be okay. It'll all be fine. No, it's whoa, the sky is falling. Good, that's good. Sky actually isn't falling, it's not that bad, but that's good. The reaction has been immediate, it's been energetic, and it's been mobilized. And so what I've seen in going out to schools is tremendous amount of experimentation about what is the right approach to improve our math science fundamentals, to get more young men and women into math and science. And so what I've done is I'm now updating the book. There'll be a 2.0 version of the book out in mid-April. And it's just expanded and updated, basically. And what I focused a lot in this book, in the new version, is what I call, on education, on what I call the new middle. That is, we knew what the old middle class jobs were. Well, I would argue that in the flat world, with certain things being outsourced and digitized, we now really want to think about what are the new middle jobs, because we need a middle class. So what will be the jobs of the new middle? So what I really did this last year, and was go around to American companies and say, who works here? Him over there, what does he do? She looks like she's got an interesting job. What's she up to? And after enough of this, I basically distilled down to 8 categories, what I call the categories of the new middle. And these aren't specific jobs, widget operator here, it's sort of broad categories. And these will be the broad categories of the new middle. I'll go through them very quickly for you. One is great collaborators, okay? When so many more things are going to be made in global supply chains, the ability to be a great collaborator, to be able to work cross-culturally and multinationally, it's going to be a huge number of jobs around managing and coordinating these global supply chains. Second are great leveragers, people who can leverage technology. So one person can do the job of 20 rather than competing with India or China where 20 people might do the job of one. So you make up for the labor cost by leveraging technology. Third are great explainers. Boy, there's going to be a whole industry in explaining because there's enormous complexity out there. So whether you're a teacher, a manager, a journalist, the ability to explain this complexity is going to be in huge demand. Fourth, I would call great localizers. Great localizers are people who can localize the global. What does that mean? They can take the power of this global platform and turn it into a local business. Now that's everything from the eBay entrepreneur, mom and pop, who now started a business on eBay, to the garage owner in New Haven who goes online one day and says to his partner, hey Bill, did you see this? We can get our hubcaps for half price from Romania, half the cost of what it would take to get us from Rochester. So they're leveraging the global platform by localizing that global. Be a huge industry in that. Fifth, I would say, are going to be people who are great adapters. Okay, people who can basically stay one step ahead of the forces of digitization and automation. And that's going to apply to a lot of people in a lot of industries. Six would be people who are what I would call passionate personalizers. If you can bring real passion and a personal touch to any vanilla task, there's going to be a job for you in the flat world. Seventh, I would call anything green. 9, anything green. And there is a job for you in the 21st century because green technology is going to be the industry of the 21st century. So those are some of the categories that I'm looking at.
No, I think the education part of what you mentioned is not only the United States. From what I gather, India, which is acclaimed as providing tens of thousands of engineers every year,
right.
India is showing anxiety that its education system is falling behind. And recently you were in India, so what did you find about Indian education system?
Well, it was interesting. I was at NASCOM, the Indian High Tech Association's annual meeting, and full of some of the brainiest, most innovative people in India. But the buzz, the subterranean buzz I found there was really all about woe is me, basically. We're now doing a lot of BPO, that's India's specialty, business process outsourcing. That's everything from answering your phone to writing your software to running your back room, your human resources department. A good business, but India's getting competition in that field now. Vietnam will come in there, Eastern Europe. They've got to move, they know, to KPO, knowledge process outsourcing, where you don't just tell me, I don't just do the how, I do the what. I actually conceive of the project, the idea, and then I execute and implement it. To do that, though, you need a different kind of mindset. You need a mindset that's questioning, that's innovative, that's synthesizing. And Indian education has been very good for pounding in those fundamentals. We know that. Nobody does it better. It's been great at getting people who know how to do the how. But it has not been great for creating people to know to ask the what and or the why. And of course, that's the strength of the United States. We need more people with good fundamentals. They need more people who are creative, and that's where you're getting this kind of grand convergence. So I think you're going to see over time a loosening up of the rigid Indian education system and introducing a lot more what and why into the classroom, because the talent is there, we know. It's just really how you shape it and reshape it.
To promote creativity.
Exactly, to promote more synthesis and creativity.
Yeah. Now, the flat world that you described, of course, is getting flatter by the day, but at the same time, I see a couple of sort of new trends.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is, as we see in China, attempt to raise cyber walls,
Right.
to still carve up the flat world,
Yes.
in a way that goes against the grain. Now, the recent development involving Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, what is your take on that? Do you think the Chinese are going to succeed in raising this cyber wall?
I have kind of four reactions to the whole Google story. And first, shame on Google. Shame on Google, shame on Microsoft, shame on Yahoo for not standing up more for certain basic principles of human rights, number one. Number two, well, I say, on the other hand, maybe we should take the high road. Keep our eye on the prize. Yes, in China today, you cannot Google search for Tiananmen Square or Falun Gong, but you can still search for Thomas Jefferson. You can still search for Ben Franklin. Isn't that what's really important? If 95% of my searches will go through, isn't that what's really important? My third reaction is, on the other hand, shame on China. After all, if I'm a Chinese graduate student in physics and I've got about to graduate from the University of Minnesota, I've got a job offer at 3M, and I've got a job offer at Huawei back in Shanghai, and I pick up the paper one day and I see I can't search, you know what? I think I may, this 3M offer is looking a lot better in Minnesota. So I think this could bite China in the bottom. And fourthly and lastly, I'm asking myself, and finally, on the other hand, is this the end of something or the beginning of something? I think it's the end of something. I think it's the last gasp of a security apparatus in China trying to show that it's still relevant and control something. But to think that you're going to control the searches of 1.3 billion people, oh, good luck. That is a fool's errand.
Well, in terms of moving bytes, you can see that maybe the cyber world will not succeed.
Right.
But moving atoms,
right.
There seems to be, again, new obstacles coming up. Recently, as you know, French government has raised objection to the Indian-owned company acquiring the French steel company Arcelor. And most recently, in the United States, there is uproar because the Dubai Port World is going to acquire management of 6 American ports. Now, this, of course, go against the grain of free market that the Western world upholds. So how do you square this? On the one hand, we uphold free market principle. On the other hand, we are picking and choosing what companies can buy in our country or not.
I don't square it, Nine. What I look on it what I look at it is with huge embarrassment. I want to put a really just disguise on to think that our country is part of this. We believe in elections. We believe in free markets. I certainly do. We're not turning over our ports, security, to Dubai Port Authority. We're turning the Port Authority in these 6 ports over to people who will say, park there, collect the fees and whatnot, and manage the traffic in the port. But they're not going to be inspecting or not inspecting cartons. They're not going to be bringing their cousins from Dubai, in to infiltrate, container ships. And I think it's a shameful and has actually slightly racist overtones to it. This is about keeping a bunch of Arabs out of our country. That's really, what it's about. And I think it's a bad thing, not only because it doesn't really reflect our real values. That's bad enough. But this can start a tit for tat. Think of how many service operations around the world, around the Arab world, we run, American companies. Think what an IBM is running, or a FedEx is running, or a UPS is running for companies around the world. What if they then turn around and say, well, you're not going to take ours? Well, we're not going to take yours. And we're in a very dangerous tit for tat that could get going here. This is a really critical moment, and we need to be very careful about this.
And also, I think, although the word has not been used yet, a subtext of all this Arab-owned company is perhaps they're Muslim.
Oh, absolutely.
That is unspoken subtext.
That's right.
And that, I fear, might also come
This will have a
public.
real, it's part of the very dangerous backlash that's going on. Both sides are guilty of it. I mean, when people, ransack a Danish embassy, in Damascus, and the government allows it, governments are there in order to restrain people's worst impulses. Well, we have nativists in our country. They have nativists in their country that are always going to want to push these kind of extremes. Government's job is to restrain that. And I think this is a really shameful episode, and I think the president's right on this one. And I don't agree with him on much, but I agree with him on this.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that is also becoming somewhat questionable is the West's commitment to democracy. We support democracy, but then when the Palestinians elect Hamas, let's think about it.
Right. No.
Now, what do you say to those who are saying, no, Hamas is a terrorist organization and should not be supported?
I think Hamas is a terrorist organization, but I also think it won a free and fair election. And if it's going to be ousted, or if it's going to be delegitimized, that should be for Palestinians to decide. And by the way, only if they do it will it actually have its delegitimizing effects or its moderating effects. If we said to Hamas tomorrow, well, you don't get any money unless you sing Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem. Okay, and then the next day they said, fine, Kol Od Balei, they started singing Hatikva. Would you believe them now? I wouldn't believe them. Okay, then I might say, well, you've got to sing Hatikva in perfect Yiddish, standing on one leg pulling your ear. I still wouldn't believe them. So why ask people to do things that even if they do them, you wouldn't believe them? Why not ask them to do something that's really hard that you would believe, and that is maintain a ceasefire with Israel? Oh, that speaks to me so much more than any words, okay? If Hamas is ready to do that, if they're ready to allow the Palestinian Authority to continue in a dialogue of negotiations with Israel, isn't that what's really important? We have a saying in journalism, as you know, never be smarter than the story. When the story is speaking to you, shut up and listen, okay? Because, all the stories I got wrong were when I was talking, when I should have been listening. Well, this story is speaking to us. So why don't we just shut up, okay? And let's listen to what it says. Let's listen to what Palestinians say. Let's see how Hamas behaves when they have the burden of responsibility. And if their deeds are consonant with our interests, that's what matters, not their words.
Yeah, the other kind of broader implication, of course, of the Hamas victory is how would this be played by the regimes in place in Middle East who are being pressed to democratize. Are they going to succeed in telling the West, look, this is what happens if you push for democracy? So what should be the response?
The response should be, that is what they will tell us. But I guess the response would be, guys, for 50 years, you've been telling us, It's you or the mosque. You know, all you Arab autocrats have been telling us it's either moi or the deluge. Well, you know what? We got the deluge anyways. It's called 9/11. All right? And it was called 7/7. And we keep getting the deluge. And part of the reason we get the deluge is because you keep producing more of these people with your authoritarian systems. So you know what? We tried that for 50 years. Maybe we'll give this a try for a couple of years. That's my attitude.
So you are prepared to accept if
I'm ready to prepare to
Islamic
accept.
Brotherhood
Yes, I am.
wins in Egypt.
You don't go from Saddam to Jefferson without going through Khomeini in the Arab world, because there's nothing between the palace and the mosque, no civil society at all. So when the palace breaks, either by election or invasion, you go straight into free fall. And we have to accept that's the reality. So you got two choices then. Preserve the palace as we've been for 50 years, knowing that it's actually creating a context that's actually producing more of these angry, frustrated, unemployed young men. Or just say, you know what? Let's try to liberalize the mosque. Once it has the burden of responsibility, who knows how they'll behave. And so if I have to have a choice these days, Naim, that's what I'm going to go for. There's much I regret about how the Iraq War was fought. But the basic gut feeling that we need to bust open that world, because the terrible bargain at the core of that world, which is dictators, basically blessing retrograde religious leaders, and those religious leaders then blessing the regime. The regime blesses them with money and title. They bless the regime in absence of a popular vote. And it's a perfect little closed loop they got going, which produces frustrated, angry, undereducated young people. That hasn't worked. It's been a failure. And I don't see any liberalizing trend to it at all. Okay? And so I think it's time we try something new.
And then lastly, how do you see Iraq's situation evolving?
I don't know. You know, what worries me, Nan, is that that we may be too late. I don't know. We made so many mistakes there that it just, what I worry about is that it may be too late. That the poison of ethnic division is now so much into the bloodstream of Iraq.
Ethnic and sectarian.
Exactly. Ethnic, religious, sectarian division. That it's going to be impossible to ever really build anything there. That's what I worry about today.
The explosion at the mosque today, I think, was
a terrible story. And, you know, let's just finish now by putting that explosion of the mosque, which is a micro, and the whole port story together. Well, no one's blowing up our ports or whatnot, but what they both do is inject that poison, the poison of division, of sectarianism, of, you know, of I want you dead, or I want you away from me. That's really dangerous, because when that starts, you just don't know where it's going to stop.
And this happening in a flat world where movement is so much easier and individuals are empowered.
Exactly. And people hear it so much quicker.
It is creating a very dangerous situation.
It's very worrying. It's very worrying when I think of how you or I could have traveled the world and did 20 years ago when we first met in Hong Kong. The ease, the carefree way we traveled. And now, the 10 things you have to think of before you get your passport stamp, it's really disturbing.
Great. Tom, thanks very much.
Pleasure as always, Nine. Thank you.
Thank you.